Warning, this edition of Gauge the Issue contains spoilers for the 2017 adaptation of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Also, I have a cold, so excuse me if my voice sounds a bit strange. I'm not gonna lie, when the first trailer for this film dropped in May 2017, I was amongst the group of very skeptical people who thought this interpretation of Murder on the Orient Express was going to be awful just because Ken Branagh looks nothing like what we've come to accept as Hercule Poirot. But don't forget, when Daniel Craig was cast as James Bond, half the onlookers were up in arms, only to be silenced when Casino Royale actually turned out to be really good. So I thought it best to just wait until this film came out and give it a proper chance. After all, you can't judge a book by its cover, you can't understand someone until you get to know them, and you certainly can't declare a new interpretation is dead on arrival when all you've got to go by is a press release and some teasers. So having already expressed my praises for the Finney and Suchet films, I'm sure some of you may be wondering if Ken Branagh actually succeeded in making a bigger hash of adapting this story than Artistry Home Entertainment. Well, the best way I can describe his effort is uninspiringly serviceable. Credit where it's due, Branagh has at least tried to separate this version from previous attempts, and the best differences can be seen in the details. The Orient Express looks and feels like a really lavish place to be. Everything from the food, the cutlery, the upholstery, the bar at the end of the dining car with the veranda on the tail end, and the fake SNCF 241. Yes, I know there was a real one involved, but most of the film was made with a fake one in the studio, which you can tell apart from the real one because the smoke deflectors are on back to front, are at least elaborate enough to make the viewer think, wow, I wish I could travel on the Orient Express. The supporting cast aren't too bad either. Okay, there's a few 21st century changes to the roles, but you'd come to expect that from an adaptation like this. Arbuthnot isn't a soldier who knew Colonel Armstrong through the army, he's a doctor who had a generic association with Armstrong, which allows Branagh to bring some ethnic diversity into the cast. There's a quip from Monsieur Bouc during the revelation that the police would suspect him straight away based on the colour of his skin. Not sure if that's awkward, or just a stab at 1930s attitudes to racial discrimination. Either way, it's rightfully dismissed before it becomes a serious issue. Mr. Hartman, the policeman, masquerades as a German professor to begin with, only to be revealed as a former American cop turned secret agent later on. Interesting twist there. At least it's different. Most of the others are generally serviceable too, including Dame Judi Dench as the princess, Olivia Colman as her German maid, Derek Jacobi going for the Hugh Bonneville performance as Masterman, but the standout performance comes from Michelle Pfeiffer as Mrs. Hubbard. She nails the character's sense of sassy dominance that made her an insufferable pain in the backside to the men who tried their way with her and the women who grew tired of her monologues. She is perfect casting. Even Johnny Depp as Ratchet seems to work. Sort of. He drops more hints about his shifty Italian underpinnings than previous interpretations, leading us to believe there's some suspicious foreshadowing going on, and there is quite an unnerving scene where he tries to hit on Mrs. Hubbard. But he's reserved enough for us to take him seriously, instead of doing yet another variation of Jack Sparrow. But then some of the changes and illusions really don't work in this film. While the practical sets look really nice, the visual effects are quite generic. Which is a shame because there's lots of stunning establishing shots of the train making its way across Europe, and like the 1974 film, the departure from Istanbul is made to feel like a great event. But because it's mostly done with CGI, it lacks the same emotion you would feel if it was really there, which only serves to harm the film later on. Unlike previous versions, you actually see the train derail in the snowdrift, but because it happens so quickly and the snow, smoke and scenery are computer generated to a mere passable standard, the impact is pretty underwhelming. It's remarkable that the Suchet film managed to dramatise that moment with fewer resources, but leave more of an impression. Which goes to prove that there's more power in what you don't see as opposed to what you do. Then let's address the elephant in the room. Or should that be the one stuck to Ken Branagh's stiff upper lip? I don't care that it took him 9 months to perfect that moustache, it looks ridiculous. With Finney and Suchet, their facial hair was extravagant and stylish, while being neat and tidy. Even Molina vaguely followed this pattern when he played the role. As such, you've only got to look at this moustache and you can identify the actor as someone trying to play Hercule Poirot, in the same way that you look at this moustache and think of the biggest monster of the 20th century. Whenever I see Branagh's impression of Poirot, all I can picture is Biggles after he's given up flying and wants to settle down with Ginger. And then there's his acting, which manages to be reserved and weird at the same time. The hunched, eccentric body language is a big part of any Poirot performance, which is easy to undertake if you're short and fat as opposed to tall with broad shoulders. Here though, Branagh is serious when the body is discovered or when he doesn't get a pair of symmetrical eggs for his breakfast, but in other scenes when he's reading, he chuckles out loud like a 5-year-old child. A blend of charm, energy, authority and dominance are what we've come to expect from the Belgian detective, but most of Branagh's expression is hidden away behind that cultivated frost on his face. It's quite an awkward performance, which doesn't strike me as Oscar nominee material. The moustache might get a chance for best makeup, but this? Poirot? Even Josh Gad as Mr. McQueen looks more like Poirot in this film. Incidentally, Gad's character goes through the most changes and is by far the worst performance in this film. Hector McQueen is written as Ratchet's timid, socially awkward secretary who Poirot quickly suspects couldn't have possibly murdered his employer. Gad is timid in this film, but only because he's an alcoholic who tries to escape from the train during a completely unnecessary chase scene halfway through the film because he turns out to have embezzled some of Ratchet's fortunes. McQueen? A money-laundering boozer? Since when did Christie write about that? But there's bigger deviations as the story continues. When Mary Debenham refuses to answer her questions, Arbuthnot distracts Poirot by shooting him in the arm. You heard right. Poirot is shot during his investigation of the murder on the Orient Express. It's not the fact that there's a phoned-in gunshot in this, it's more the fact that moments like these makes it no longer feel like Agatha Christie's mystery story, and more like a generic action caper. There's nothing significant that stands out about it. And that's before we get to a niggly continuity error surrounding the murder. When the train stops, half the passengers tumble out of their cabins, including Ratchet, who's still alive. Yet when the murder takes place, the sounds and rhythm of the train lead you to believe they're still moving. This undermines the theory of the murder occurring between midnight and 2 in the morning, as they still stop around 12:37 when Ratchet is still alive. I was left particularly confused by this point. I won't give away the conclusion Poirot gives to the police, even though I will say it's more faithful to the original story. The only thing you need to know about the ending is that it sets up the next film about Death on the Nile. So, it looks like we're getting a Poirot franchise now? Good luck rivaling Mr. Suchet, Ken. Overall, this interpretation of Murder on the Orient Express is not awful. In many places, it really does try to be different. But in doing so, it doesn't seem entirely sure if it wants to be a faithful adaptation or a generic action thriller. It just feels like yet another pointless remake that can be added to the pile of pointless remakes. If you're mildly curious, looking for some pleasing eye candy, or just want something involving a train to fill 2 hours, you will get it here. But if you're looking for an adaptation of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, Messieurs Finney and Suchet will fill you in. I'm Chris, and I'm here to gauge the issue.